What's up, y'all? It's finally time to begin my 5 or 6-ish maybe series of videos on how to start your own fursuit making business. This is the first vid in the series. This is probably going to be the most boring one, but it's also possibly going to come off as kind of preachy and condescending, and I really don't mean it that way. I really don't. Think of this as more of a warning vid. I'm going to talk about these things in terms of things to consider before you start your fursuit making business. So I'm really not trying to preach. I'm not trying to call anyone out. I'm just trying to make you aware of all this stuff before you get into this really big commitment that is starting your own business. So with that, in this video, I'm going to be talking about 6 things. I'm going to be talking about 3 things you need to know / consider before starting a fursuit making business, and then 3 things you need before starting your own business. If you hear my cat crying at any point during this video, I'm sorry, she's outside my door, but it's also a possibility that she might get in because my cat has now learned how to open my door, handle and all. So that's something that happens now. Alright, let's begin. So, the first 3 things I'm going to go over, as I said before, are the 3 things you need to know / consider before starting your fursuit business for the first time. Now, the first thing on this list, and probably one of the most important ones, this is a business, so make sure you treat it like one. You're probably thinking, what do you mean it's a business? Of course it is, I'm going to treat it like one. Well, a lot of people, for the first time when they get into this is their first self-owned business. It was my first, and when it is your first of anything, you have to learn a lot of things from, the bottom up. Especially when this is a business that is just you. Most times when people start, especially their own fursuit making business, they're just going in it alone initially to begin with, and so they have to handle everything. What does having your own business mean? It means you're in charge of making the product, you're in charge of the PR, you're in charge of the emails, you're in charge of the money, you're in charge of managing the money, you're in charge of all that stuff. It's all you, and it's a big venture, and it's something that you can't, brush off to the side. Is some people like to think that even though they have a business and that even though they're self-employed, they can make their own rules. And sure, you can make your own rules in the sense that you make your own hours, you make your own work days, but you can't make your own rules in the sense that I have a business, I'm going to get to it once every 3 months. That's not how business works. There's nothing wrong with, again, setting your own rules and working your own hours, but make sure you're working actual hours to keep your business afloat and not treat it kind of like a side job or a hobby, because obviously by definition, that's not a business. So overall, what I'm trying to say is when you start this fursuit making business, please realize that that is exactly what it is, and act accordingly. Which is a perfect segue into the second point, and that is make sure this is what you want. Here's the thing, here's the secret. You don't have to make fursuits and have a fursuit making business. You can just make fursuits on your own time. You can make it for fun. You can do it as a hobby. You can make it for your friend. You don't have to have a business to make fursuits. So when you start thinking about it, make sure it's actually what you want. If you want to just sell pre-mades, you can kind of make yourself a business in that sense, but a true business is one where the product keeps coming in and out. It's the one working with customers. So you can definitely make pre-mades, completely, but you're going to have less of a formal business. It's more of just a hobbyist. You can kind of make your own rules when you're just making pre-mades. So really think about it. Really think about what actually having the business entails. And consider that if you only want to make a fursuit for fun, or if you only know you make fursuits once every 2 months, having a fursuit business probably is not the best option for you. And again, nothing wrong with that. Nobody said you have to have a business when you're making fursuits. You can do it for fun, but make sure it is what you want before you get into it. So you heard those last 2 tips. You know what a business entails. You know that you want it. What is the last thing you really need to consider? Because everything else is good. You're ready. You're going to do this. This is the most important of the 3. Make sure you'll be able to handle it. Now, this is really important because, unfortunately, this is one that people a lot of times don't realize until they start their business, and it really comes down on them that they realize they can't do it. Some people are just not made to handle their own businesses, and there's nothing wrong with that, but that's just how it is. And like I said before, they don't realize it until it's already too late. So really think about what a business entails, and think about if that is something that you think you can handle, if you know you can realistically meet deadlines, if you know you realistically are good with money, and on the opposite side, side, if you know you're not good with money, if you know you're not good with deadlines, if you know you're not good with personal contact between emails, stuff like that, maybe a business is not right for you, even if you want it. But yeah, again, just make sure it's something you can handle. I've seen countless makers in the past think they can do it. They take a handful of commissions and it's just they're not good with deadlines or they're not good with money, and they end up unintentionally scamming a lot of people because not because they're bad people, not because they don't have a good product, but they just can't deal with the business aspect, so they end up falling behind and it's just a mess from there for everybody. So just stuff to keep in mind. My cat has officially made it in my room and is now sitting on my chair, so I don't know what I expected. Okay, now that I've gone over all the unfun stuff, it's time for the more lighthearted stuff, I guess. And again, like I said, I'm not trying to preach at anyone, I'm really just trying to get you informed so you know what's coming down the line if you choose to start up your own business. Okay, the 3 things that you need to have before starting your own fursuit making business. Number 1 is going to be kind of obvious, but I'm going to say it, and that is good materials. Now, I've made a video in the past about the fursuit making supplies you should have before you get started, and in that video I talk about some of the higher quality products, and I've gotten a lot of comments on that video saying, oh, you don't need to do that, you can just get this craft fur and start out, and you don't know. That is all true. You definitely don't need top quality products when you are practicing on making fursuits or when it's your first few, but if you're really considering starting a business, you're going to want to invest in at least the bare minimum kind of quality product. So I really suggest not starting your business if you're still using craft fur or like lower quality foam or anything like that. Yes, it's going to be a little more expensive, but you've now decided to put your product into the world, to actually have people pay for it. And so what they're paying for is not craft fur or craft foam or anything like that. They're paying for an actual quality product. So I highly suggest, if you haven't seen that video, I'll link it below. Go check out some of the higher quality products. It really isn't that expensive to get like some nice fur and some nice thread and scissors and all that stuff. So I really suggest having at least standard quality materials when you start your business, because that's what your customers are going to be looking for. And when you have a quality product, you have happy customers. Okay, the second thing you need, and this is probably the one people don't want to hear about if you don't have it, and that is a social media presence. Yes, you need a social media presence. And I'm not saying that because you need to socialize with people, although talking with customers and getting clients is good. Your social media presence is mainly going to be for getting your product out there. Fursuit making businesses are largely online. Why? Because they're all over the country. Fursuit makers don't have stores that you can just go into, and fursuit makers are everywhere. So the main way to hear about them is through their online presence, through their Instagram pictures, through their Twitter posts, stuff like that. So you're really going to want to have a social media presence if you want your business to get anywhere off the ground. Fun tip. It is always easier to start a business after you've made a name for yourself versus starting from the ground up. What I mean by that is, if your name is Blue Wolf and you've been drawing for 2 years and people know your art, and you're suddenly like, hey, I'm starting a fursuit making business, here is my product, people are going to be like, oh, Blue Wolf, I know you, you make great art, and so your fursuits are probably going to be good too. I'm going to keep watching you. Versus if you're somebody who doesn't have any kind of presence and you pop up randomly and you're like, hi, I'm making fursuits now. And people are going to be like, who are you? Not saying you can't do that, but it's always going to be harder to just start from the ground up. So if you really want to get into the business world, especially fursuit making, I highly suggest trying to, establish yourself beforehand. And it doesn't have to be as an artist, it can just be as a furry, but you really don't want to just pop out of the blue and be like, hey, I sell fursuits now, because you're gonna have a much harder time gathering a crowd that way. Now, if you are somebody who has all the social media, great, you already got this, you don't have to worry about that. But if you're somebody who doesn't, and I'm actually kind of surprised by this, there's a lot of people who don't have specific social medias. They have everything else except like one, and I used to be that way too. I used to see some of these social medias, I'd be like, I don't need that, I don't care. But especially if you're an artist, social media is the best way to get your work out there. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you're a furry, especially a fursuiting furry, your weapon of choice is going to be Twitter. And I know a lot of people don't like to hear that, because when I go on Instagram, and I have people on Instagram, like, you know, order stuff for me. I ask them for their Twitter. They don't have one. And I can kind of get it because Twitter can be a little more, I guess, intimidating, quote unquote, if you haven't used it before. But I'm really going to stress that Twitter is where the main furry population hangs out. It's where you're going to get your biggest market of, you know, more mature furries seeing your work, and it's where you're going to see probably the biggest concentration of like furry art via, you know, regular artwork or fursuits or whatnot. So if you don't have a Twitter already, I highly suggest you make one. It's going to be really helpful to you overall. After that, you should definitely have an Instagram. You should also have a Fur Affinity account. You don't need it, but it's helpful because that is strictly furry based. And then as a side, you might also want to have a DeviantArt and then maybe a YouTube on the side. In my experience, most fursuit makers use YouTube kind of like a, you know, portfolio where they show off their work, not so much sell it or promote it, but it doesn't hurt to have one. Tip, but I highly suggest getting a social media and establishing yourself there because it's going to be really beneficial in getting your product out there. So that's have a Twitter, an Instagram, a Fur Affinity, and then a DeviantArt and a YouTube if you can. Anything else would be extra, but it never hurts to get yourself out there on as many platforms as you can. Okay, the last thing you need to have before starting your fursuit business, and when I say need, I'm kind of emphasizing that here, and that is skill. Now before I get anyone yelling at me being like, oh, I'm not that good yet, I still have to practice, I'm not talking about professional skill. I'm talking about a basic skill. Again, I'm not trying to be preachy, but listen guys, after you make your first fursuit, you don't have to sell it. You don't have to start your business after making your first or second fursuit, because your first fursuit is never gonna be the best fursuit you made. I made that video a while back about, like, I think it was tips on your first fursuit, and I can't tell you the amount of comments I've seen that said, my first fursuit is great, my first fursuit turned out great, I loved it, it turned out perfect. That is totally fine that your first fursuit turned out great. I'm happy for you. But here's a fact. Your second fursuit will always be better than your first, and your third will always be better than your second. And I'm not saying that because your first fursuit turned out bad. I'm saying that because with every time you do something over and over, you get slightly better at it, no matter what it is. So your second and third fursuit are always going to be better than your first. Also, something a lot of people don't take into account is the fact that your first fursuit and your second fursuit, while they both might be great, they might not look like each other. When you're still learning how to make fursuits, you're also learning how to find your style in fursuit, find your fursuit making voice. And your first, second, and third all might look like they're made by completely different makers. And there's nothing wrong with that when you're learning, but if you're starting a fursuit business after your first fursuit and people see that, they're gonna order from you and they're gonna be like, that's what I'm getting. Well, guess what? Your second fursuit came out different because you're still learning, you're still finding your fursuit voice, and your customer gets that product and they're like, what's this? This isn't what I ordered, and they'll get upset. So I really, really suggest you take the time to get the actual basic skill level before you start a fursuit business, because it's only going to help you in the long run. It's going to make sure your customers know what they're getting, and all around, it's just beneficial. If I had to put a number on it for all of you out there who are thinking about this, I would say you should probably wait until your fourth or fifth fursuit to really start thinking about starting a business and actually selling them. Because by fursuit number 5, you've started to kind of find yourself. It's still going to evolve over time, it really is. But by 5, you at least have a solid grasp of what you're doing, and what people are seeing is probably what they're going to get for the time being. So again, really, you don't have to rush into it. You don't have to jump into it right after you make your first or second, because you'll probably end up with problems down the line if you're still learning and you're still turning out different products. So really, just make sure you have the basic skill, make sure you have the basic foundation of what you can do as a crafter before you start your business and you start putting your product out there for everyone to buy. Alright everyone, that is it. I actually can't tell if this video was long or short. I feel like it might be on the shorter side, but I feel like also every time I say that, it's not. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed. This was the boring talking video. This wasn't the fun talking about anything fursuit related video, I guess, in a sense. But coming in next in the series is going to be a fun video, I know that. And that is going to be talking about 5 mistakes that customers make ordering their first fursuit and how you, as a first-time fursuit maker, can deal with them. So with that, it's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you take all this into account. If you're mad at me for saying any of this, I'm sorry. Feel free to yell at me in the comments. But until next time, bye!